Welcome CSC 235 to exercise 4b, where we're going to continue our exploration of JavaScript loops and also the HTML DOM using JavaScript. And we're just going to be working with arrays a little bit and just kind of generating HTML elements on a page. And one of the places you're going to want to look, again, we looked at this at the end of the last video, was under JavaScript DOM. And if you go to DOM document down here, they show you some adding and deleting elements methods that you can use. Create element, and you put the element in there like a p or a whatever div, whatever it is. Remove child, append child. We're going to be using create element and append child because if we append child, we're going to add it to it. That way we don't have to do that like plus or equals or add it to itself like we had to do before we had any paragraphs. So we're going to use some of these here. And we're just going to do that to create paragraphs on a page, and then eventually we'll make a list so that we get a little more complex with the types of elements that we're creating. So if you need to create elements inside of elements, we'll know how to do that. But we'll start with this, just doing paragraphs. And I'll go back here and I'll make a new repel. I'll make sure it's an HTML, CSS, JS template. And I'll just put 235 again. I'll put dash, I'll put ex4b because this isn't long enough to be a whole new exercise, but we'll call it 4b. And I'll just call it loop days, or something like that. And I'll put CJH, and I'll hit create repel. And again, we could have looped the other one, but I want us to get used to doing this. So I want to get rid of hello world. I want to get rid of all this stuff down here. And now notice there's a whole script down here that we want to get rid of, another source that's online that we want to get rid of. So we just want to have that. And while we're in here, we'll make a div, and I'll put a pound sign because that'll make an ID, and I'll just call it days because it'll make the days of the week. We'll do that instead of fruit. That'll be a lot more exciting. Days of the week. And I'll hit tab, and that way we have a div. Now again, we're making dynamic HTML here, meaning it's created when the JavaScript runs. So there's nothing in here. So when you run it, there's nothing here, but eventually we will. We're making JavaScript make our dynamic HTML. It's dynamic. When you look at the HTML here, when you inspect the code, there's nothing there, but then voila, when it's generated to the page, there'll be more HTML code there that we're creating with JavaScript. That's dynamic. And we'll go into here. Now we do have our link. Make sure you have your link to script.js, and then go into script.js, and we'll make a quick array. We'll just call it const, and we'll call it days, and we'll put equals, and we'll make our brackets, square brackets that is, and I'll start with Sunday, comma, Monday. You may have this somewhere else that you can copy. It's not that hard to type. Okay, I typed it, and then I can double click, and then hold Option and double click. I'm holding down Option. You might want to try Alt or another key. And let me know too. And then I can still leave go of everything and then do shift quote. And now I have an array called days. And what I want to do is just print them all out to separate paragraphs. So we're going to use a loop to do that. So we'll put for, and we'll just start this off real basic, this kind of generic I, remember what we put next, equals, and we're setting it to the value of almost like a variable, 0. That means we're starting at index 0. And not a comma, we're putting a semicolon. And you could put a space, it looks a little better. And then we put kind of the condition, and it's like while I is less than, and we'll just put days dot length. That way if that ever changes, if there's a new day, we can put something else in there. And we need a semicolon, and then we're going to do the I++. So that's basically the condition of our loop, and then we're going to put in what's going to happen in here in the curly brace of our loop. So what's going to happen? Well, we basically want to print it out. Now we can't just put print like we do with Python. We have to actually create elements each time. So let's create elements. How do we create an element? Document.createElement. So we're going to create an element. Now we do want to make sure that it goes inside our div, but we can do that when we print it out. We can make sure that it gets printed out inside that days div or whatever the div we have there. I think it's called Dave. So we're going to create an element. So let's just go to copy this, or we could just type it. You don't have to copy that. But we're going to create an element. So each time we're going to create an element. So let's go document.createElement. There it is. And the element we're going to create is a P. Now, because we're just going to write to this, we should really make a variable that represents this. So I'm going to say let, and I'll put day. I'll call this day equals. And that'll basically represent getting that. So that's basically our P element. So what we could do next is just try this, put day dot inner HTML equals, and we're just going to put days and put the index number in there. And I'll put a semicolon. That seems easy enough. Let's see what happens. Nothing. Well, let's see what happened here. Let's inspect. And there it is, div ID days. There's nothing in there. So it didn't do anything yet. So we didn't even tell it where to put it. So the one thing we have to do here is basically tell it document dot. So this is kind of creating it, but it's not really putting it on the page because it doesn't know where to put it on the page. So we're going to put get element by ID. And what do we want to get? What element? Well, we actually want to put this stuff inside of days, which is the div. So we're going to put days and make sure we put it in quotes. And then we're going to have to append child. So we're going to append child and append the element in there. So let's do dot append child. So this is telling us where we're going to append child, and what are we going to append? Well, not just P, we're going to append day. And that's working. So what we're doing here is we're having day represent the paragraph that we just created. And then we're saying, this is like saying P dot paragraph dot inner HTML. So the inner HTML that's going to be written into that paragraph is going to be this value, days I, which will be one of these. And then each time it will append it to the page using day, which is actually the paragraph. So it's appending that value to the paragraph, if that makes any sense. So let's just try it out. And that's working. And let's inspect it just to see what got written to the page. And there it made our paragraphs. Paragraph. So we have 7 paragraphs there that got written to the page dynamically by that code. So again, we're using appendChild here as part of our loop so that it's not just writing it once, so that it can keep appending paragraphs there. And also what I want to point out here is that when we're printing out day, it already has its inner HTML defined, because this is basically taking the variable day and saying, okay, its inner HTML is going to be whatever this value is. So for example, if you went in here and just put red in as a string, and you said, well, now its value is red. If you printed out, within the days div, and you appended child of P, it's going to have that value. So if you run it, it's going to be red basically 7 times. So we're kind of declaring the value of the variable, or its inner HTML. I guess not the value, but its property. This variable is going to have that property, whatever is here. So if this is going to be days I, which is going to be the index of each day, each time you go through it, it's going to print that out. And it's going to append a new one with that value each time. So the first time when I run it, so the first time it's going to go through and say, okay, create an element P and give that an inner HTML property of days I, which is going to be Sunday, which is going to be the 0 index. So it's going to go through here and go into the days div, and it's going to append a paragraph, and it's already going to have that value of Sunday. Then it'll go through and it'll get the value of Monday, and it'll print out Monday, and so on. So I know it's a little confusing, but that's why we're taking this in little slow steps. So we'll keep working with this in 4C. In 4C, we'll talk about putting a list together using some of this. So we're kind of building up slowly here. So this is 4B. It's just a little bit of code here, just a little bit of HTML here, and we're just kind of learning about the DOM a little bit. I'm going slow here because some of it doesn't always kind of make sense. You might be like, well, if day, wouldn't it just put a P there? How is it putting the value in there? But we're already determining what the value is that's going in there. So we'll kind of work a little bit more and kind of expand on this a little bit as we go. But that's 4B.